time for a blind insight again with me, Simon Hill, and Billy Spateman.
Hello.
And it's only been a couple of weeks actually or so since we were last here, but it feels like a lot's happened one way or another.
Sort of.
If I'd imagine people are expecting me to give my thoughts on the new President of America, so I'll do that. Also, we've had the tragic events, really. Obviously tragic in Spain, Valencia, which is curious to me because I actually visited Valencia not long ago, and I'll explain a bit about the things that they'd done there to try and prevent flooding, but sadly doesn't seem to have helped them much. And then I also going to I wasn't sure whether it was one for comeback common sense or in the name of sanity, to be honest, but either way I think it qualifies for both. But I'll the moment's passed now because unfortunately we are recording this after Remembrance Sunday, but I still found it utterly bewildering, frightening and bizarre, but also I'll tell you about that episode as well. And I'm actually on my holes next week, going to Lanzarote, so I'll talk a bit about the sort of conundrum or the viewpoints about blind people going to foreign places, to famous sites and things, and because a lot of people sort of say, well, is there any point? Or and even some blind people I know have had that attitude, and then others think, well, you get what you can out of it. So we'll discuss that a bit, but I think we've got to start really with America, and it's funny really because I've never really known. I mean, obviously it's a big country, it has a lot of say in what goes on in the world. It seems like it always has done, and yet it seems like absolutely as many people in Britain were determined to have their say on where it should go and what should happen as over there. But I think I can understand why people don't like Trump's approach, or maybe are made a bit anxious by things he says and so on. But to be honest, my view is, well, first and foremost, it was a democratic vote, and that has to be accepted, because otherwise what's democracy worth? But I think, to be honest, let's face it, things are not in good shape around the world anyway. There's many people trying to force their agenda, shall we say, on events, and it's only a matter of time, really, as it stands, before the troubles in the Middle East and become a more direct threat or have a more direct impact on us, to be honest, I think. And I think the only way we're going to sort it out is with direct speakers and people who will take action and not just talk about it. And that may sound like a scary thing to say, but I think a lot of leaders and people who supposedly have power these days seem to think they're just writing fancy speeches and talking about things gets things done, and having meetings and summits and all this, that, the other. But ultimately, I think history tells us or shows us that in the end, sometimes you have to face these challenges and these threats head on, and there's no way around that.
Well, he certainly appointed a few controversial people, and he's appointed Musk as one of his. Yeah. Well, I listened to a debate about it, and there's Musk and this other chap, and they're almost like troubleshooters, and they're not sort of what would you call it? They're not a Congress position. They're almost like advisors in a sense, but he's had to get round it by calling whatever department they are. Create some department. So, and they're hatchet men, and they're just going to go in there and just rip into the government.
Well, I only caught a glimpse of it, but I'm pretty sure the department or the title he's got is heading up overseeing bureaucracy in the government, which I think is just brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, the one bloke said, the one that was having the debate said, well, actually, what the policy is they think they're going to get rid of the education system and they're going to get rid of the FBI and they're going to get rid of this. And you go, what is the left that they're not going to get rid of?
But you know, seriously, you know, and this not just America. I mean, here, for goodness sake, I'd love us to appoint, you know, an overseer of bureaucracy in this country. I really would. You know, there's got to be. There's so much poor decision making, so much waste, so much unaccounted for spending, and you know, in all governments, I'm sure, but certainly here, and no doubt in America, and this is what people are tired of, and so whatever we think about, you know, Musk as an individual, he's a businessman, and you know, you don't get when you have to take the risks and make your, you know, when you're running a business, no matter how large or small it is, ultimately, you take the risk, but you have to get those risks. You have to make the right moves, otherwise you lose your money. And there's no, you know, yes, you're right. You might be able to get bailed out once or twice with a loan or something, but it's not just the constant blank check that you get from government, which is the problem. And so, hopefully, if people like that are involved, it will lead to better decision making. Less, you know, things done more efficiently and quicker, and therefore, you know, rather than waiting years for a decision to be made about something or having inquiries that go on forever and cost millions, things will get done instead of just being talked about.
Do you think it's a statement as such as this? Be saying, look, we're the wealthy people, we run the world anyway, so why not put us in? You know, why not put these blokes in positions of power who are obviously successful because they know how to be successful, rather than somebody who, you know, who flits from one department to another. You know, he's a minister of so and so one month and then a minister of so and so the next, just filling spaces. It's to me, it's just, particularly there. It's like saying, well, you know, we'll give it to the folks who are successful. And why they're successful is because the way they run the business. So if they can run the country the same as they run the business, it's got to be a positive, ain't it?
Well, a country should be run like a business, in terms of the financial aspect, because ultimately, if you waste money and don't get value for money, you end up throwing good money after bad and getting nowhere. Well, I mean, I don't. At the end of the day, you can break it down however you want, but you know, I'm sure we've all done jobs alongside people who, you know, are quite content doing what they started doing and are still doing the same years or decades later in some cases. You know, that's fine. That's their choice. You know, they might whinge about how the place is run, but they've got no desire to run it themselves or, you know, get involved and try and make it better. And that's how some people are. And then other people, you know, like to try and make a difference, and if they see a problem, like trying to fix it. And I mean, it's been, you know, I've got to be careful what I say, but it's been an eye opener for me. As much as I, you know, had theories about how the civil service in this country works and everything. Now I work for it. It's absolutely, you couldn't believe it until you're amongst it, and that's for me is at the heart of so many things, because the attitude, there's no give up and go. There doesn't seem to be any desire to do things differently. It's just, you know, you've got people who've worked there for decades and they just accept it. You know, and if you come in as a newbie and try and shake it up, you've got to drag all them with you. Otherwise, you end up giving up.
Do you think then they feel totally protected in the position that they've got, and so you know, they know there's no threat to the jobs. They know that they're going to be in a job for life. You know, they know they're going to have a good pension, and so it almost, I don't know, negates the fire that you've got to get on.
There's no survival instinct, is there? If you ultimately you can't get voted out, unlike the, you know, the government and the, you know, all the ministers that we see and hear from all the time. If you don't, unless you do something absolutely catastrophic, you won't get sacked. And so in the end, it's down to you, isn't it? You can either go as far, you can try and climb the ladder if you wish, or move about, try something new if you wish. But ultimately, unless you decide to leave or do something drastically wrong, then you're there forever if that's what you want. And it's that, and then people become, it's a human nature thing, isn't it? People become, I don't want to say lazy, but they become comfortable, or
Yeah, it's a safe haven, isn't it?
they do their job. They know what they're doing. I mean, so many times now I've spoke to other people in the jobs I've had, and I said, how long you been in? Oh, 10 years, 15 years. I said, well, you never got bored, and they said, no, I know the job like the back of my hand, and I said, all right, and that suits some people, that's fine, but we can't keep complaining that things are wrong if we don't let people come in and shake them up and make them better. And like with business people, they have to survive. They have to look at how they can be efficient, how they can, get the best for their money. And yes, obviously, sadly, that means that some people lose jobs from time to time, or that they can't pay very much in wages and so on. But ultimately, that's the reality. That's what they have to survive. They can't just keep pushing the boundaries and taking more money if it's not producing the outcomes they're looking for. And so hopefully with people, for example, if we bring it to this country, I mean, if someone like Alan Sugar, for argument's sake, was appointed to some role in, I'd love that. If he wanted to do it, because that these people ultimately have got to where they've got to. Whether you begrudge it them or not, but the point of the matter is they've got to where they've got to by taking risks, but calculated risks, and ultimately not wasting money and not wasting opportunities.
I think, and the important thing I think is if they've been knocked down, they get back up again. They don't think. I mean, we've had people on our Sunday show that have been millionaires 3 times over, lost it, and they're still out there striving because it's either something that's inbuilt in them, or it's something that they have a taste for it and they think, well, I'm going to strive, and they learn by the mistakes.
Yeah, and
many of them will say, well, you don't learn while everything's going great. You only learn when it ain't.
Well, that's it. And again, I mean, time after time we hear the same things. The same services aren't run well. This, that, and the other, whatever you want to say. And so we're not learning anything. We keep having the same debate year after year, the same complaints, the same things are wrong. So, whatever. It seems that the main issues that America have are, some of them similar to here, and they're concerned mostly about the way the economy is going, about the how much it's costing them to import goods from other places, and how much business they're doing with other countries, and immigration. But ultimately, and again, I mean, from what I heard, and and generally the summary seems to be from people who have followed the whole thing, is that ultimately Kamala Harris didn't didn't say to people, this is what I plan to do about it. And when you've been part of a government that whatever you may think, whether you think you've been successful or not, the point is many people don't feel you've been successful. You've got to work twice as hard to convince people to give you another chance, and that's where they fell down. And ultimately, you can, as we should have learnt in this country by now, you can dismiss people's views and call them right wing, left wing, whatever you want. But ultimately, that's what people think. That's what people feel, and if you're going to put something to the vote, that's what people are going to express, and you can't just keep ducking the problems forever and writing clever speeches and dismissing the problems just with a few clever words. People want to see action, decisive action, and yes, it may cause some rumblings, but there's already rumblings going on. You can't hide from it. And so
it may be, whether you agree or disagree with him or people, it may be that it'll change the old culture of going forward of politics, won't it? Because it's a different construction that he's trying to bring in that you probably haven't seen before. Everywhere is always a safe bet, whereas he's thinking, well, I'm going to give these blokes are successful blokes. I'm going to give them the rein and let them do what they want to do. Yeah. And if it upsets people, it upsets people. And whatever you think of him, I think he's as mad as a box of frogs. But he sticks to his guns and he'll say, if it works, it works. If it don't, it don't. But we're going to try it anyway.
That's it. And like, you know, I'm sure many people are just tired of hearing the same old thing, but dressed up in a slightly different way. And you know, in the end, what's really changed over the last 10, 20 years? You know, not just here or in America, but in the world. Have we gone forward? Are things any better? You know, we keep every year we're constantly told that there's still, you know, there's still countries in poverty, still countries starving, still this, that, and the other. You know, there's never enough money around. Whoever's giving it, and ultimately there's always people trying to get something off someone else, and that's where wars are coming in. And
it's wrong, isn't it? I mean, it was I heard on the radio today, I think it was, there are 4.5 million children that don't know if they're going to have something to eat tonight. I mean, that's just disgusting in a modern society, isn't it?
Well, you know, how can it be? You know, when how many, billions, maybe trillions, I don't know, but if you just take the last 30 years, you know, since Bob Geldof, you know, started up, you know, how much money has been given to supposedly, you know, every year people do sponsored swims, runs, this, that, and the other. I mean, Children in Need's coming up again, so that'll supposedly raise another however many million. Where
does it go?
You're telling me that it makes no difference.
Yeah,
that's essentially what you're telling us.
Yeah,
that's our thoughts on the situation in America, and as always, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it'll be an interesting ride, I think, that's for sure. But moving on to events. Well, obviously not just back home, all around the world. It was Remembrance Sunday. Another year goes by. In fact, 100 years since the First World. No, it's not. What am I talking about? 110 years, sorry, since the First World War started. Now, so I remember when that was 100 years. So where the 10 years has gone, I've got no idea. But so obviously, hopefully there was a. That's again something that I don't get to sort of experience, being blind, poppies around, and you know, the visual things that go on, and all the rest of it. But as I said, unfortunately, amongst it all, well, a few weeks before it was announced, I had hoped that some common sense would apply and it would get sorted out, but it didn't. So I'm going to vent about it. So come back, common sense is back.
Oh, come back, common sense. Oh, send me a postcard from wherever you go. Tell me what it's like there, I really want to know. And the world's gone insane ever since you disappeared. Hey, common sense, how I wish you were here. Hey, common sense, yeah, I wish you were here.
Yeah, as I say, it first came to my attention a few weeks ago that apparently, due to insurance reasons of all things, a lot of Remembrance Day parades were being cancelled. And I thought, no, someone must be exaggerating or something. But no, numbers I've seen flashed around, you know, literally we're down to almost, rather than hundreds of parades across the country, we were down to around double figures. I don't know about locally whether you heard anything or whether it was...
I don't know. My mate John, who's ex-para, fought in Falklands and Ireland and various other places. I mean, he went to the Arboretum in the end because, I mean, he has got this, and I don't really want to offend anybody because they do a great job, the poppy collectors and everything, but he has this real thing about people going to memorial services wearing stuff that is not applicable to if they served or not. Yeah. You know, there are specific things, he says, that that mark you out as a para. Yeah. And he says, no, I've seen people in para regalia that were never in the paras. Yeah. And he says, and that really gets my goat. He said, so now all I do is I go to the Arboretum every year. I go away. Apparently the SAS and the paras area is separate to the others. And he says, and I go down and I pay my respects because I know the people who are going to be there are ex-SAS or ex-paras. Yeah. And he said, and that's a trend that seems to be increasing, and I suppose it's got to really because age comes into it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will have passed on. Does somebody just pick up that in respect of who they are standing in for, or are various badges and medals mementos and they wear them? I don't know, but he I mean, I'm not an ex-para, so I wouldn't recognise the fact.
No,
but he recognises the fact that people stand there and they're not part of the regiment, or they're not part of the people who actually served.
I can see that it's a bit like, well, regardless of whatever regiment or who you represented, it's a bit like we do live in a society where a lot of people try to sort of piggyback, shall we say, off what other people that they happen to know, and they might only be distantly related or whatever it may be, and they try and sort of, I don't know, they want to get a piece of their sort of achievement or what they're being remembered for. Which, and at the end of the day, the way I see it is you can stand there and you can be somewhere and pay your respects. You don't need to be dressed up as if I do think that. I do agree that the wearing the uniforms and the medals or whatever, it wouldn't feel right to me if I suddenly whacked on a load of medals that my granddad had won or something, or in the day they're not yours. It wasn't. Yes, you're there to honour and remember them, but it wasn't you.
No.
So I can see that sort of.
And I suppose his argument is that they didn't see what I saw. They didn't do what I did. They didn't lose who I lost. And so, therefore, it's almost like a sham that they're standing there, and because of what he's gone through, he feels that it's not right for him to stand there. He'll go somewhere where he knows there are people from his regiment or from the paras or from the SAS, because he feels comfortable in that environment, because there's that mutual respect.
Well, it's like, I mean, there were so many, and again, this is what I don't think people realise if they don't study their history, is when you say World War, there's just so many aspects to it. The people, some people served at sea, so therefore they experienced it from being a sailor on the sea. That's where they fought, and and that's where they lost friends and colleagues. Other people were in the air, whether it was piloting the Spitfires or taking the bombs over Germany. Others were on the ground in the infantry. They were the ones who ran into danger day after day, whether it was in France, Italy, even as far away as Burma, and all these places that we there's so many different parts to it and so many individual experiences, and I think that's the mistake some people do make, that they almost think it was just sort of one thing happening in one place. It was genuinely a worldwide thing that affected people in so many different ways, and I think, I don't know, dare I say, it's almost gets a bit commercialised, if that's the right word. In terms of everybody sort of jumps on the bandwagon, but don't really think, it's a very personal, and yes, sadly, as the years go by, we're losing people who were actually there and experienced it. In terms of the world wars, obviously there's unfortunately been other conflicts since, and still is, but in terms of the world wars, which we're just, it just beggars belief, that the numbers that we lost. And one of the things that always stands out in my mind is that I can't sort of look around a graveyard and see that all the, but when you go to some of these graveyards and the walls sort of 10 foot high, maybe more, just full of names, lists and lists of names of men from all over the world, all backgrounds, all walks of life, who went there all to fight for the same cause, but ultimately never came back. And that's just it's something that you have to be very mindful of, and unfortunately society, I don't think doesn't think things through sometimes with how they do things, but it
seems a slur to them, doesn't it, to think, I don't know if which councils didn't do them, but you'd think, well, it can't cost that much money to put on a service,
Well,
as opposed to, I don't know, having a music festival or having some, where do the priorities lie
Well,
in terms of respect and history, in a way? It's
Well,
almost like saying we're negating history, it don't matter now.
well, my gripe was, so we can't have that, but yet people can go out and protest in their thousands virtually every day on the streets, and and they wreck things and do damage and this, that, and the other. But we have to put up with that and do that, which is their right. I'm not saying that, but it's equally surely it's the people that died are the reason they've got the freedom to go and do that in the first place. And so to say that insurance is a barrier to doing that is just, I mean, there are surely things where that doesn't matter. It's just, yeah, let's just get on with it and just do it. There can be no reason, no justification for not allowing people to remember or march, go on a march or whatever they want to do. Remember the people that made that sacrifice for us. But yeah, moving on to, talk about España. But first of all, we need to, mention the tragic events with the flooding, and cause obviously there's a lot of Spanish people in this country who've been affected by it, and obviously Brits living abroad. So it's all just a bit bizarre, I find it.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it, really?
Because the main thing is I went to Valencia, as I said, not so long ago, a couple of years ago, and one of the main sort of features they've got there is they rerouted the river. So the river, so you can still see it's still got all the bridges and the river valley and everything, but they've now turned that into sort of parkland or put sports pitches on it and all that kind of thing. So it still runs through the middle of the town, but they've redirected the river around the edge of the town with the idea of preventing flooding. But clearly something hasn't gone right, and I've not heard or read exactly where it sort of stemmed from. I mean, I presume it must have just flowed out from the mountains or something. But
I think because they had, I don't know, a year's worth of rain in that many hours, it just came in from all over the place and immediately caused this problem with the rivers over flooding and that. But it was just, I mean, to look at it, it was almost like one of these disaster movies, wasn't it? 1 minute the cars were there, the next minute they were swept away.
But it's just a frightening thing when they were saying that, so far this many people have been killed or are missing, but we still need to search for all these cars. So there might be more in there. It's like grief. It's just so clearly just. I mean, I understand. There's a lot of anger towards the authorities, and the people weren't given any warning or not enough warning. It seemed they don't think but then it seems like it seems like it happened so quick, and could they have anticipated that it would be so, drastic? It's a difficult one, but
I mean, you look at the science now with weather, and they still get it wrong. I mean, even on a minute scale, here you see the 6 o'clock, whatever it is, the 6 o'clock weather, and it's got this band's coming in and this band's coming in, and we're going to predict this, and then you go out the next day all togged up, and it's totally different. You think, well, hang on a minute. It's the 21st century. They've got apps that can do it within seconds, and they still get the weather wrong. How does that work?
I can honestly say I pay absolutely no attention to weather forecasts because I just don't see the point. At the end of the day, it does what it's going to do. Yes, obviously, if there's something extreme on the way, then if they can warn us about it, then that's, obviously helpful. But otherwise, I'm not going to spend, it's going to be so, and then go out togged up to be for cold and end up baking or vice versa. And all I do is see what the temperature's doing, get a rough idea, and that's it. If it rains, it rains. If it does, whatever it wants to do. But yeah, but that's it. And so I've got some sympathy with, the authorities. There's obviously, but I mean, it's going to take a lot of time to clear it up, and obviously a lot of cost. But
what was lovely was the way, the way the community came together as usual. Like the thousands, they weren't just from Valencia; they were from all over the place, and it was just incredible to see that. I think where the people take charge in the end, don't they?
Well, it restores. Well, it kind of goes back to what we were saying. If people taking responsibility, taking action, saying, right, we're the ones here. We're on the ground. We're going to make the decision. We're going to take the action that needs to be done and do it the best we can. You don't need to be a professional or. End of the day, there's some things in life which hopefully are common sense. End of the day, you need to, they went out with shovels and buckets and whatever they could get hold of, didn't they? And went to try and clean up or try and rescue, and so again, actions is what sorts things out in the end, not just talking and shouting about it. And so it restores your faith in humanity when when things are really down, that people do pull together. But there was some really, really sad and really upsetting stories amongst it, and obviously it's not going to be much of a Christmas for them, is it? But,
no, and obviously, I suppose from a tourist point of view, people do go there in the winter as well. All that's lost economically. That's lost. So it's bigger picture than what you would imagine, really.
Mind you, if you speak to some Spanish people, though,
they don't want
us there anyway. So, that's another two-sided argument. But I'm taking the risk. I'm going to Lanzarote. I mean, obviously not mainland Spain, but still the a popular one of the popular Canary Islands. I've not been before, so it's somewhere different. And my point. I know people might think, what's the point in you going to, I don't know, whatever famous sites you want to see because you can't. And it's true. No, I can't. But it's, to me, places have a feel. And, an atmosphere. Whatever it may be, and and you can touch whatever you can. I mean, even if it's just I get to touch, the side of a building or something, or and for me, it's the thing to say I've been there. It's yes, I haven't got the full experience I would have had as if I could see, but I've been there. I've taken what I can out of it, and whether and some places have got sounds to them, whether if they involve water, for example, or so to me, there's always something you can take out of it. But then if it doesn't interest you, it doesn't interest you, and that's the. But it does irritate me when people sort of assume that, oh, what's the point in you going because you won't get anything out of it. I said, well, that's up to me, isn't it? I'll get out of it if I try and get something out of it, I'll get something out of it, and that's the.
What's the logistics of obviously you've got to book it and that, but what's the logistics in terms of the journey and everything? Is it complex, or do you rely on people doing the job properly?
Well, I mean, I know blind people who have flown on their own, as it were, with no sighted person with them, and they've survived. But whether saying it would be straightforward is wouldn't necessarily be true. But for me, I mean, it's like everything. You're dealing with the world which wants you to do everything with technology rather than speak to a human as it is. And then, like negotiating an airport, I mean, sighted people find that difficult enough, let alone, if you can book assistance with the airport in advance, and if you turn up, it depends what you need. So like in my case, I don't need assistance in terms of a wheelchair or assistance getting onto the plane, as it were. It's just getting through security without being mown down by people who don't want to wait, or or you're trying to take things out of your pockets and everybody's pushing from behind and trying to hurry you up, and then when it comes to getting on the plane, getting on as one of the first few to get on, because then you haven't got people pushing you in the aisle or blocking your way, or and obviously it's a cramped environment anyway on the plane, so it's just, if you can get to where you need to be. So I just try and get to my seat and then just stay there, basically.
What's the attitude of the general public generally? Do they? I don't know. Are they not concerned, or do they? Are they generally over protective in a way and come and help, or you a hindrance to their plans? Because they're all stressed at an airport,
I genuinely think. I mean, like I say, it's difficult to know for certain because I'm not on my own, but I would never. Well, it would be a last resort if I ever did brave, attempting travelling through an airport or on a plane on my own. But so I'm always with somebody. But I genuinely think that when a plane comes into land, that illustrates the impatience of the modern society. Because no matter how many times you get told, don't take your seatbelts off till we've stopped, don't switch your phones on until you're outside the plane, the terminal building. All these things. What happens? The plane's barely slowed down after landing, and you can hear phones being switched on, belts being unbuckled, everybody jumping up, and you're like, for goodness sake. And then they can't go anywhere anyway, because they don't open the doors for another, but there's this impatience of, no, I'm going to be first, and that it's very interesting to watch how people do it, and it's but then like I say, I mean, you when you go through the airport or through passport control getting your bags, everybody's just on their own mission, really. It feels like, anyway. If you're in their sort of zone or their group, then okay. But if you're not, you're just in the way, And they just, it's just about getting where they want to be as quickly as possible. And so to stop and help someone else, not everybody. I'm not saying there aren't some decent, helpful, genuine people, but generally speaking, if you're standing there with your cane or hoping for help, I suspect you'd be a long time waiting. But
and when you get the other end, or come back to send the other end, so do they allocate somebody when you're on, when your stuff's going around the wheel? Do they allocate, and how would they know when yours comes?
Well, I've never tried that bit. I've never asked, but I'm not sure the assistants. I mean, there's another thing. I'm not sure. I'm sure they would do if you asked them to, and you just have to know what your bag looked like, which, to be fair, is your responsibility. You can't expect people to go looking for stuff for you if you can't tell them what they're looking for. But I've not tried that one yet. But
I just wonder, when you got you're in for an airport, the assistants don't speak English. And you've got to get somewhere, and you just think, well, how on earth do you negotiate that?
Yeah. Well, I am, after a long time I was put off learning languages at school, really, because I don't know why, but I only did German and French, but I really struggled with it, especially French. And, if you get your confidence knocked at a young age, it sort of puts you off. But I always find I'm one of these people, nothing irritates me more than British people. If I'm there if I'm abroad and I see British people who are just, talking English in whatever, whatever accent or whatever way, and the person, the Spanish person or whatever it is, doesn't understand them, they get stroppy. I think, hang on a second, we're here in their country. You're not even attempting to speak their language. You can't get stroppy with them if they don't quite understand you.
Yeah, and I think generally when I've been abroad or we've been abroad, if you make an attempt, even if it's poor, they will genuinely think,
appreciate it.
They'll appreciate it, even if they laugh and you order the wrong thing. I mean, I remember we were in Greece once, and my sister-in-law said she knew Greece down to a fine art, and we were in a restaurant and she wanted to order, so she ordered, and then there was this all hell broke loose when the waiter come round with the manager, because she'd obviously asked for a doctor for some reason or other instead of ordering, God knows what it was, lamb stifado, but they found the funny part of it, and they were overly friendly then after there, because they thought, they're really having an attempt. So,
well, this is the theory I'm working on. So I've got myself an audio book of Teach Yourself Spanish. So I'm working on that. So I'm going to attempt a few things when I'm over there and see how I get on. But it's if you can shake off the worry and the embarrassment, think, what if I get it wrong? But like you say, you hope if it's just simple things like ordering your food or a drink or something, or like I say, I'm hoping that they'll appreciate that effort, however bad it may be. Rather than just shouting English at them as you would at home, but it's.
Yeah. But, is this the first time you ventured then, or?
No,
you've been before?
Well, no, I've not been to Lanzarote. That's somewhere new. But I've been. Like I said, I've been to Valencia. I've been to Spain, a few different places, a few times, and obviously when I was playing football, I went obviously to China, and Argentina, far off places I wouldn't have otherwise been. So, I just like I've got the bug, or not the bug, but I do like travel as much as obviously there's a lot of stress with it. But it's like I get really irritated that I haven't made it to Italy yet because there's so much there I want to go and experience. Yeah. And it feels like everybody else has been, but I still haven't. Yeah. So,
well, we used to go with an Italian who lived next door to us, and it's an absolutely phenomenal place in terms of the culture. And as you say, textures and smells and stuff like that. It's so there's so many different things that you can experience there. I'm sure you'd love it, really.
Well, it's one of those. I always say if I get it's one of those. I know I need to go at least 3 times because I want to go to Rome, I want to go to Pompeii and Sorrento, and I want to go to Pisa for the Leaning Tower, and so I always say that if I go for a week, then I'll come back heavier because I'll just eat pizza and pasta.
Yeah, pizza and pasta all the time.
But
yeah, I mean, it was on the news, wasn't it? They're cutting down on the tourists to the main track, like Pompeii and that, because of the footfall, and it's wearing it out. So I suppose, you don't realise, do it? You just traipse over everything and don't realise that you're wearing away the past in a way.
Well, I mean, obviously, you think you go there for a day or whatever, but then day in, day out, it amounts to however many thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of visitors, and you think it's got to take its toll. And obviously, these things are old and need to be maintained and looked after, and so you can understand it. So I just hope that I get there before they put a full ban on it or something. But
I think the first time Mick took us, the Colosseum was under construction. It was weird because there was like scaffolding all around the Colosseum. You think, what they got this for? But no, I'm sure you get on great.
And there's Mr. Ben calling time on our discussion for this episode. Hope you found it enjoyable and interesting. And as always, thoughts, comments, ideas for topics for Comeback Common Sense or stories for What in the Name of Sanity, all welcome. Get in touch by email simonhill_6@hotmail.com, or you can also comment on the podcast page. Sorry that there's been a bit of a delay between the release of episodes over the last few months due to extra commitments these days with working full time. Unfortunately, I haven't got round to recording as often as I'd like to. I will be putting out a Christmas themed episode though, and as part of that, I'm putting together some of my favourite clips or quotes from Christmas shows, comedies, films, all that sort of thing. So contributions will be welcome for that. Again, via email or the podcast page. Let me know quotes that have made you laugh, made you cry over the years at Christmas, and we'll relive some fond memories of those in the next episode. Until then, take care, and we'll be back soon.